Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on, disruptions, evolutions, opportunities, challenges, and interventions in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge. Sophie investigates the promise and reality of the future of work now and as we look ahead. She interviews people who are changing work experiences and practices and shares how we can each transition smoothly and successfully to effective and more productive new ways of working.
Hi. This episode is about artificial intelligence, AI. Its potential, its limitations, its potential to disrupt, our limitations to project. We can be so tethered to the past, we find it hard to imagine into the future where AI is taking us in leaps and bounds beyond today. What different work would you do if you had someone, like an intern or AI agent, to help you? If AI up-levels and does the heavy lifting, getting the basics done, producing average work, how do we develop, create, and evaluate what's good and great? And how may and must students practice with AI at school and college to prepare for AI-integrated workplaces? To explore these questions and many others, I'm delighted to be speaking with Mike Todasco, visiting fellow at the James Silver Red Brown Center for Artificial Intelligence at San Diego State University. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, Sophie. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, thank you. At the beginning, you studied finance in college. Why did you do that?
Why did I study finance in college? Because when I was a kid, I really liked money. That was the only reason, I think. I didn't know what finance really was. I knew it had something to do with money. And ever since I was a kid, I grew up in the 1980s at a time where there was a baseball card boom happening. I was probably about 10, 11 years old when I started selling. I started doing conventions and actually setting up tables when I was 14.
No way.
Okay. I paid for most of college just by selling collectibles and stuff. So it was always something that was leading me towards that. And finance just seemed to make sense.
Okay, so money equals developing your own businesses, being an entrepreneur, selling and trading baseball cards, plus, plus. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the connection.
So then why GE doing financial management? Why was that the first company? Yes, GE was doing some extraordinary things at that time, but you're coming from a very entrepreneurial background going into a huge company.
Yeah. I did have a lot of friends who did consulting and things like that, but I was more attracted to companies that made stuff. And I had one professor in a management class, probably one of my favorite professors in college, and he talked about Jack Welch. This was in the late 1990s.
Yep.
Jack Welch was named the manager of the century and all this other stuff. And it was one of those things that I had an offer from two different companies. I got rejected by 35, 40. I actually blanketed my apartment wall with things. I still have all the rejection letters.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And it was oh, wow, I could work for the guy that my favorite teacher was talking about all the times in class. That was a large part it. I thought NBC was cool because in this program, I got to kind of say where my choices were to go work. So my first choice was NBC. And then my second was aircraft engines. I didn't know anything about aircraft engines.
Because they are so similar.
Yeah. And then the rest was power systems and appliances and all this other kind of stuff. They didn't bring me into New York for NBC, but I did get sent to Cincinnati for aircraft engines. It was in a 2-year program. It was called the Financial Management Program. Okay. So you have all these 6-month jobs.
Right.
It's a great thing to do out of school, just a rotational program. It's been around for 100 plus years. They've been doing it forever. But I hated all the jobs. None of the jobs were a fit for me.
It helped you figure out what you didn't want to do, right?
Exactly. And just doing core finance, core accounting type stuff, it just wasn't the fit for me. It was a great background to have, which I'm sure will come up later. But I was just looking to do something else. Frankly, the first company that reached out was a company called Mead. And Mead would make Trapper Keepers and spiral notebooks and all these other kind of paper products.
Right.
They were local. I interviewed with them. And I actually remember they left, I didn't have a cell phone back then, but they left an offer on my answering machine before I even got back home. And that was so impressive for an employer to be able to just like do it that fast. That was one of the things that sold me. I mean, again, you don't have to be the biggest company in the world. Sometimes just being scrappy and nimble, or at least, that team was scrappy and nimble. Right. It was like, okay, I'll do that.
I get it. Yes. That would make me feel super good.
Yeah, totally does. Yes.
And then how did that change as Mead was then acquired a different company? Because the machinations of a merger are complicated or can be complicated.
Yeah, I went through many iterations of that in my time there. So I was always like within finance, but finance also had a strategy wing. So I got to kind of participate in some of that because some of the M&A activities. So there was Mead merged with a company called Westvaco to become the horribly named Mead Westvaco. And then soon after that, the division I was actually in got spun out to private equity. And so I kind of got to see that whole other side of things. It was called NewPage.
So from NewPage, you then moved to PayPal. What generated that transition? What were you looking for then at PayPal?
I had moved to Silicon Valley in 2006. It was for my wife's job.
Okay.
But I continued to work for NewPage. So I was taking a lot of red eyes back to Ohio. Oy. And meanwhile, I love technology. I'm surrounded by all these really cool tech companies. Mm-hmm. I actually went to get an MBA part-time while still working at the paper company. Okay. And so I was kind of getting part of the culture here. And I just loved the tech companies and all that. Started my own company. That didn't go how I hoped. Right. And then, 2011 rolls around. I'm looking for things to do. And then I had an opportunity to join PayPal, which was a product I had used since they were paying people to use it. I had a lot of friends and classmates that were there. Yeah. And a chance to join the mobile team, which in 2011 was like a really exciting team to join.
Love of technology, finance background, and then you get into product. I imagine these are financially related products. You stayed at PayPal for a long time and create a good number of patents. How did that all happen?
My first job was doing data science, data analytics, which is kind of close to finance, working with numbers and stuff like that. But that was within the product world. So I got to hop around and did product marketing and product management and all this. But one of the products I got to work on was something that was called PayPal Beacon. And if anybody ever wants to look this up on YouTube, it is an extremely cool next generation product that we were building in 2013, where you can have a piece of hardware that we were actually constructing that would talk to a person's phone. And so what that would enable a merchant who runs a donut shop could stick this hardware in the wall. Somebody walks in with the PayPal app on their phone. Those two things are talking to each other, and it allows you to do things like hands-free payments and things like that. So it was very much an emerging new technology. It was using this Bluetooth 4.0 that was a new standard in a very different way. Okay. And as part of the process, when I was working on that, a bunch of lawyers came to me one time and from within PayPal and like, hey, we need to discuss this. Oh, geez, here I go. I feel that these things all the time. And they sat me down and like, well, explain how it works. How do you do this? And then they would ask questions like, well, what else does this do? Okay, could you do this? What else could you do? I didn't realize these were patent attorneys. They were patent attorneys within PayPal/eBay at the time. All right. Okay. And they were wanting to know what's capable because they're like, hey, we've heard about this thing. We probably should file some patents on it. And honestly, Sophie, it was like one of the most fun meetings I've ever had because I was just in there and I'm like, hey, you could do this and this. And like, it was just a chance to just like be freewheeling, be creative, really think about the future.
That does not sound like a typical lawyer's meeting, but that does just say.
It was 180 degrees from what I thought. Exactly. Right. Like this was not the typical lawyer meeting. And that just got me going down that path. We filed a whole bunch of patents for that product. Okay. Could I do this for other stuff too? And I literally would just go team per team across the company. I would conduct brainstorming sessions myself and all this. So I became a guy who liked to come up with ideas for patents.
You come from a finance background. That isn't necessarily a person who you'd go, yeah, he's the brainstorm guy who comes up with all these different ideas. What was your methodology? Obviously, patent lawyers really stimulate your creativity, but when you're going into a typical team in PayPal, how did you help them generate the ideas with you? You're stimulating them to bounce ideas off them about their own product and features and possibilities.
Absolutely, Sophie. I think, well, the first thing I would say is don't forget I was a bad finance person. So if I was a good finance person, maybe I wouldn't have been as good as that, but I was bad.
Okay.
But I think you're right. If you're going to a team, and it doesn't have to be for a patent, it could be for a host of other things that you're trying to come up with, better solutions and so forth. It all comes down to just really asking good questions, to just kind of take a step back and say like, okay, what is it we can do? Like, the improv technique of yes and. So if you're improvising in comedy with somebody else, you never want to disagree. You just want to keep building on each other's ideas and build and build and build. Yeah. And those would be the kind of things that we would do in these sessions. And to me, it was just fun. They would be fun. They would be playful. They would have food. They would have jokes. They would have all this. And it's, bringing out this other childish side, which often in the workplace, you have to kind of suppress. You have to sort of keep that down. You're not allowed in most engineering meetings to say, well, hey, if we had 1,000 engineers working on this product, what could we do? Because it's like, well, you have 5, you're not getting 1,000. But in a patent session, you could start the session saying like, hey, imagine we just started off and you got 1,000 people working for you. What are you going to do? And that starts to open up possibilities.
Got it.
And one of the fun things when you look at questions, when you ask things from a completely different way, it forces you to different answers. I'll just give one other one that I remember using with some teams within PayPal. PayPal historically would, we would charge merchants. So if you're a consumer, you go onto Walmart's website, you use the PayPal button. Walmart is paying PayPal for that. The consumer doesn't pay anything. That's basically how PayPal's business works. So I remember I hosted a whole bunch of these sessions saying like, okay, we're changing the business model. Now PayPal is actually free for merchants to use. So we still have all this cost, all this stuff. What do we do? And, that is, the first reaction to a question like that usually will be like, that's stupid. That's impossible. That's whatever, because it's just not how things are done. But even just asking the right type of question like that, Sophie, is a way to just really force people to take a step back. Because after a few minutes, they're like, okay, well, maybe what if we did charge consumers? How could we charge consumers? Like, what would that look like? Or could you do an ad network? Could you do this? Could you do this? And then it just leads to one thing, and ideas build, and 95% of the ideas are junk, but 5% of the ideas are something really golden, really special that you wouldn't have come up with otherwise. And that's kind of the whole process.
Now you've left PayPal and you're focused on AI. What generated that particular new direction with a focus deep on technology? And I know that you've written one particular piece, which is the history of illusion. Why did you write that piece? And how does that fit into the new narrative and new phase of your journey?
I think what attracts me to AI and where we're at today is the fact that I was not an engineer. That I was not somebody who was able to code. When I was running the innovation group at PayPal, there were machine learning engineers who would do all these amazing things with AI tools. And they would show these demos and do all this. And they would sit in our innovation lab and do whatever else. And the whole time I was like, that's really cool, but I can't do that.
Right.
And, fast forward, I'm hearing these rumblings about GPT-2 and GPT-3. These are kind of the predecessors to ChatGPT. And finally got access to GPT-3 in 2021. Okay. And I was just kind of working on some side writing project. I was just imagining what would the future look like if an AI became president. Literally writing the inaugural address of an AI president. So I stole some from Barack Obama. I wrote a few lines myself in addition to that. And then, I'm just going to feed this into GPT-3 and just let it finish. And I remember doing that, and it was magical. It was the first time I'd used one of these tools. It was adding words to it. And it sort of made sense. And especially from the standpoint of an AI writing this in the future, it would have hallucinations, it would do all this weird stuff. But to me, being able to use just regular English, moving a few dials for creativity and all this other stuff, I was able to just generate this and have it spit out something that had never existed before. And that was me creating something with an AI. That was truly magical. And from that point, Sophie, I got it. I was like, oh my gosh, if you can do this now, what are you going to be able to do a year and 2 years and 3 years and 4 years and where we're at today? So that's what kind of got me down this path. I became obsessed with it. The next year I left PayPal, and I think by summer of 2022, there were tools like DALL-E. DALL-E 2 had been released, which allows people to create images from a text prompt. And there is some buzz, but people weren't talking about it. So I need to start writing about this. I love to write, and this is what I need to do. I just left PayPal. This really wasn't part of a grand plan, to be truthful, but it's just clear to me I need to start writing about it. So that summer I did, and I just started writing and writing and writing.
You gave me an example when we first talked that helped me picture what some of the at least next few steps might be. You talked about GPS.
So GPS was a government application from the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, and it was used for military purposes, for tracking planes and all this other kind of stuff. And it was this system of satellites that was around there. And in the 1990s, Bill Clinton signed into law that they were I don't know what it's called, but basically opening it up to the public.
Right.
So GPS was not loaned just for the government use. They were gonna limit it to like 10 meters of accuracy, so it wasn't perfect. That eventually went away, but they were opening up to the public, and nobody knew what this meant. But you would start to see things like, companies, Trimble Diagnostics, they would do farming equipment and things like that. So you started to see, you could see how you go from military to farming equipment and moving things around and all that other kind of stuff. That makes sense. And that kept on going and going and going. But, our society where we're at today, without that deregulation in the 1990s, we would never be able to have Instacart or Uber or Google Maps, or frankly, any kind of self-driving car, or any of these kind of things are all dependent on that initial technology. And believe me, when Clinton signed that into law, he's like, okay, we're going to have Instacart after this. No, he didn't know that. Nobody knew that. But, just opening that up brought so many possibilities. So that's like where we're at with AI today. I mean, we're starting, this is in people's hands. Even if we never even improve the AI we had today, we still have exponential improvements and opportunities in front of us, just with the models that exist, because we don't even fully know how to use them yet. And that's the exciting thing.
Literally from week to week, never mind month to month, they're developing at an extraordinary pace. That was 30 years ago. So 30 years took us from military to farming equipment to now to Uber and DoorDash and Waze, which I use all the time. From the perspective you have, what do you imagine maybe some of the first steps, the next steps of what you're seeing or you're imagining might be possible, since you're so deep into the thought process about it?
The one thing today that really excites me, using AI tools that frankly consumers could do now, is actually just around the area of medicine. Let me give you a very specific example that I lived about 6 months ago.
Right.
My mother, who lives nearby, had to go to the ER for something. She's totally fine now, but it was a little bit scary. And frankly, for anybody who's ever had to been in an emergency room, it's not the greatest of experiences.
Right.
Especially if you're bleeding out, as they say, like they take care of you, they do all that. If you're just there and they're not sure, you could be waiting for hours. Hours and hours. This is universally true in the United States. So we were there. They would do these tests with her. And the whole time, and I will say, to credit the hospital there, like she was getting the results in her app of saying, this test means this test means this.
That's pretty good.
I'm not a doctor. Like, I have no idea. But at some point I said, like, hey, Mom, can I just scan these things? And so I would just put these test results in ChatGPT. And I would say,
Oh,
hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. This is what's happening. Can you explain to us what's going on here? And honestly, Sophie, it was the peace of mind. Like at the very least, we got from
sure.
that to just kind of say like, hey, it looks like it might be this, and so on and so forth. Like
Got it.
just explaining, you could add more, you can ask it questions. You can even do things that we did like say, when the doctor does come, what questions should we ask the
Oh,
doctor?
yeah.
It's there to help you. It's a
Sure.
tool, it's a resource. And again, ChatGPT is not made for this at all. And in fact, in some ways, I'm sure in the terms of service, they probably discourage it. Like it's not supposed to be giving out medical advice. And so there's a little bit of a gray area in that. But what these tools can do to be a patient advocate, to do that, like, I mean, imagine if we had access to maybe some history of my mom's blood tests and all this other kind of stuff that you put into the tool, it could start to really make sense out of it. And like, that's just one area to me that is just so ripe for opportunity. Doctors are so overworked. Sure. And the expectation of a primary care physician, it is absurd. They have hundreds of patients that they view. Maybe you get minutes with them on average every year. And to actually keep all of this about this patient and their brain and all that, like versus to have an AI in the room with them, this is just a better future where it's not the AI driving things, but it's AI plus human. That's the one area to me where I really, really, see once you kind of get past the hurdles of inertia and just how things are already done, and we start to see, well, there's a better opportunity, that's when it's going to start to change.
And that's what you're talking about, the history of illusion. It's still being anchored too much to how we have been doing things?
Yes. In that article, what I was writing about, it was a three-parter, and I was very focused on like, well, what does this mean for jobs? AI, what all that we're doing.
Okay, let's dig into that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the first things that you saw was, back in 2016, I actually remember this very well. The consensus was radiologists are gone. You are not going to have radiologists anymore. And Jeffrey Hinton, who just won the Nobel Prize for his work in the field of AI, actually did a speech, which I included in the article, where he basically said, in 5 years, there are going to be no more radiologists. You should not send your kids to school to be radiologists. AI is going to take over everything. He said this in 2016. 8 years later, to where we're at today, there are more radiologists today than there were in 2016. How did that happen? Is it that they pushed back and were like, no, we're not going to use AI? No, actually, radiologists use more AI than any other field of medicine.
Okay.
If their FDA approves certain software products, and so if you look at the list, they kind of have it by group. I think a third of them were somehow related to radiology over the past several years.
Okay.
And yeah, with where we're at today, there's more of them. It's changed. They've been better in their jobs. They've been able to do more. The radiologist's job has changed, but their outcomes have improved. And I'm not saying that's going to happen for every job. Every job's a series of tasks, and some of those will evolve, but the radiologists evolved with the AI and have made for so much better outcomes for their patients.
Going to the idea of jobs and how we have been working, how work has been set up and organized with the construct of jobs. If we break that down to tasks, which can be assembled into different projects, how do you see that evolving into the future because of the different ways that we are and maybe using AI in many different ways going forward?
Yeah. This gets into the history of illusion and just kind of that looking back and so forth. And to explain that for folks, what it refers to is we can look back at our prior selves from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago, and we see ourselves today as different people. We see our jobs as being different than when we did 10 or 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we didn't have as much email, maybe it's not as many meetings or whatever it might be. We understand how this evolved. We as humans, though, we have a much, much harder time looking forward to the future and seeing how we're going to continue to evolve. And it doesn't matter what age you are, because some people are like, oh, well, maybe that's just if you're old, you're set in your ways. If you're young, you're not. No, like this is across all age groups. People have this perception gap that I think is something just inherent to us as humans, where we think our self today is our idealized self for what we believe, for how we act, for how we work, for whatever it might be. We think everyone else on this planet is wrong about stuff except for me, right?
I could do with a tiny tweak here or there, but generally it's all good.
Yeah. Maybe I could lose 5 pounds. Maybe I could do this or whatever else.
Right,
but generally, you look at yourself as my beliefs today are the right beliefs, and that is what I think. But we change, and our jobs will change too. And just like the internet and email and computers and all of these things, if you just kind of keep going back and back and back, transformed our jobs. It did eliminate, there's no people that work elevators anymore, up and down and all that. We have a push button system for that. So those jobs, while they were prominent in the 1950s, they don't exist today. So some jobs will go away, but many other jobs will just evolve and they will just change into something new. So looking at what that's going to be like with AI, I mean, truly, I don't know what the future is going to be. But I do know for people who are concerned about this, the one thing that you can do is really just understand what the AI can do for you. Because this is a tool. Like if you were back in 2000, you're saying, do you know what? I'm not going to use this internet thing. And believe me, plenty of people said that, especially after the .com crash.
Right.
Plenty of people were like, the internet was a fad. It's useless. And you know what? I bet you're willing to bet just about any amount of money, there will be an AI crash. There will be. And we will see, and there will be a whole bunch of naysayers that will say, do you know what? AI is not the future, whatever it might be. And on the other side of this, when you start to realize what the technology can do, it just becomes as clear as day of like, oh my gosh, this is something I could use as a tool to help me in my job, to help me in my personal life. And your job will change because of it. But the more you understand about it, the more power you have and what that looks like in the future.
So to get practical for a second, how many different AI apps do you use? Not necessarily on a daily basis, but every couple of days, because I use a number of different ones and I'm trying hard to explore. I'm trying to understand how the AI will change jobs in terms of what you're using in different ways, both to test its capabilities, push yourself, and try to project and imagine what more can be done. You also have a background of sitting there and exploring and brainstorming. You already have had that role to sit there and say, what more could this technology do? And supercharged, AI powered, that becomes even an explosive exercise, perhaps.
Yeah. So what apps do I use today? It is pretty limited, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, I have access to a lot. I will sometimes use them. I will use something like Descript for editing, but I'm not editing videos or audio all the time. And I will use Midjourney to generate photos, but I'm not constantly generating photos or images and all that. It basically comes down to, I would say, ChatGPT and Claude,
right,
and Grammarly. I would probably put up there as well. Those would probably be the three that I use on a daily basis.
And Notebook LM?
I use it occasionally, not all the time. I think it's great. I've been able to generate the podcast from it. Notebook LM is a very cool tool that Google has out there for folks who don't know, where you can upload documents up there. It can kind of summarize them for you. You could query those documents specifically. It does a really nice job of that. It's not part of my workflow, though. Right. I would say mostly it's Claude and ChatGPT. Mostly.
How long did you take to get to this point where you understood your workflow, how these different applications could augment what you were doing? And how often now do you go back to test or just check out what the developments are and other apps, new apps, and how they're being augmented and added to? Obviously, is changing all the time.
I would say, probably whenever a new model will come out or something like that, I will test it out. And at a certain point of buzz or whatever, I'm like, okay. And I think everyone should be very open to that. Kashmir Hill from the New York Times wrote a really interesting piece about where she was going to have an AI run her life for a week.
Okay.
Really great for folks to give that a read if you haven't already. And so one of the things she talks about in the piece, how like she she downloaded tons of apps.
All right.
Something for cooking, something for getting haircuts, all these AI generated apps. And she even said, like, by the end, she was just using ChatGPT for everything. Like she literally was saying, because the AI would run her life and it would say, okay, here's something I need AI. What should I do? And then AI would do this or this. And it would tell her. And so she did that for a week and wrote a story about it. But like, even then, most of these models are built off of ChatGPT, maybe Claude, Meta's Llama, all that.
They just focus AI agents doing specific things which have been super prompted.
Yeah, and I think so. I've just found for myself, like, the amount of just ChatGPT has so much information in it. That's probably even more than Claude is great for writing. So if I need if I need brainstorming tips, I might use Claude over ChatGPT. But, even just like in the car, like ChatGPT's voice mode is incredible. We'll have that playing on the car speakers. We will have the kids asking it questions. We will have it tell us a story. We'll have it do whatever.
Right.
You can play around with these things. And I have no financial stake in this. I want to be very clear. But for $20 a month, if you would have told myself 5 years ago, hey, you can have an assistant that would do this. It could write for you, could do all this. How much would you pay? I'm sure I would probably said, like, well, a few $1,000s a month for something like that. We all get it for like $20 a month. We as a society, I think we tend to take things for granted very, very quickly. And it just becomes normal that you can, get Wi-Fi in the sky and all this other kind of stuff, all these amazing things we don't even think about. It is really incredible what you can do with these.
I find so many people who are overwhelmed with what they have to do already. Never mind, try and understand, try and learn all these new different ways of doing things, trying to imagine how to be using them. Sometimes there is an advantage of being a pioneer. Sometimes it can be better to wait a bit and then come in when everybody else has worked out the kinks. Let's just say you're a rising leader in a large organization, obviously recognizing there may be parameters and privacy and rules for using AI, or leading a small organization, you're an entrepreneur. What do you suggest in terms of how to be interacting with AI, learning from it, you learning it for yourself as the leader, and also bringing your teams on board, getting them to experiment? Because also what goes hand in hand with the technology aspect of it and the augmenting skills aspect is how it's going to change my job. If I'm one of your team members, how is it going to be affecting me? Because there's a fear factor, right? If I really learn how to use it, is my job still going to exist? So what do you suggest and how to help that happen and manage the different outcomes that can go in very different directions?
It's a great question. I think it's hard for managers, for leaders and organizations. The first thing I would say is don't wait, just do it now. To use an internet term, we're at the Lycos Alta Vista part of search engines. And it would never have made sense to say, well, just wait for Google to come around.
Right.
It'll be okay. Yep. Well, no, you can actually get a lot from these other things that are there now. Don't just wait for Google, because we don't even know what Google is going to be yet.
Yep.
So yes, it's early, but you could already start getting so much benefit from these tools. If I was leading a team, I would do a couple pretty simple things. If my company was on Teams or Slack or whatever, I would set up a special team channel where I want people, well, first I would get them access to, let's just say ChatGPT. It really doesn't matter which one they choose, but say, okay, we're going to get the corporate plan, $20 a month. We will, it's approved by the company. Don't worry about data leakage, anything like that. Boom. So that's the first thing. And I would buy it for every person on my team. I would then set up a channel in Teams or Slack where I would say, hey, I want you to share in here how you are using this tool. And, maybe I say once a week, you have to post something. Maybe I just, by example, start posting myself and just see what organically comes up. But just have a place where people can discuss and just can see what is possible. Because so much, again, there's literally infinite possibilities that you can do with these tools. And because there are so many possibilities with that, people tend to freeze up. It's the paradox of choice. It's too much for us almost. Right. But that's way, if you start to see real life examples from that means something. And if I really wanted to go further, with this. I did something very similar back when I was at PayPal with one of my teams on a different subject, but I would say, okay, we have a weekly staff meeting, and we're all going to meet there and talk about our stuff. But do you know what? Starting next week, I'm going to begin every staff meeting by cold calling on one person in the room to tell me about a way that they use ChatGPT in their personal or professional life. Mm-hmm. Just one way. What did you do in the last week? And the initial reaction from everyone will be like, "Oh my God, that's awful!" Like you're going to just cold call on somebody,
right?
But it's a way. But it's a way to just drive home, like, "Hey, this is important." It's not meant to embarrass you, but it is meant to just get you to start thinking about this. And I don't care if you come and tell me you helped. And I've done this before. I've actually planned my daughter's birthday party using ChatGPT. If you come to work and tell us about how you helped plan that, amazing. Amazing. Like I want everyone to clap at the staff meeting after I cold call on you. But then just even hearing that at the beginning of every meeting, people will start to see like, oh, it's important. And also, oh, you could do that? Oh, I didn't know you could do that. It's going to spur more and more ideas. And that's going to start to build that muscle within your team, whether, you're 10 people or 100 people, whatever it might be. Like that's just how you start to create that organizational, mindset around this is a tool that's really powerful. Let's figure out how to use it together.
Yes. And I would say, having done a couple of AI courses, it's the community post the courses of the cohorts who are all actually from both courses are all in it together and constantly sharing every single day. There are multiple posts from people sharing what they've done, how they've used it, asking questions. I had problems with ChatGPT, couldn't count. Now I understand it can't count. But it was so frustrating to me. Oh my goodness. It took me a long time to go back to the community, ask the question, and then kind of got the slap head. And I've created a couple of agents and we're getting better.
Yeah.
It's actually been a very detailed super prompt, but it needs to get better. So I can really see the benefit of having that community sharing, ongoing experimentation and pushing people just to keep prodding. And I don't prod myself enough to be exploring all the different other ways that I might be able to use it. I am using it in video and audio clips and stuff like that for the work that we're doing. I did try with presentations. I have a whole bunch of presentations, but when we were looking at that, it was helpful. It added, but there's still so much of the finessing that requires the essence of what I bring, that it is that bottom 80% that is super helpful with.
I would never, I love to write. I would never use AI to write a first draft. It's just not going to be good enough. It's not going to be up to snuff for me. If you're somebody who does presentations and you know how to make a very good presentation, you have a vision, it's not going to be as good as what you could do. But it might be able to help out with parts of the process. Just like it helps me be a better writer.
Right.
How I use it for presentations, I actually generate all of my clip art and stuff like that using AI tools like Midjourney. Flux is another one. And they're often not
By
perfect.
The way, listeners, I'm listening to this and I'm writing these notes down.
Yeah, please. No, Flux is wonderful too. And that one's open source. I mean, in short, Sophie, it's come a long way. You don't have six-fingered hands and stuff like that anymore. Like all those things, like it gets worked out. Now, you do it. There is a little bit of an art to it. Like if you say, hey, I want somebody who looks like this and somebody who looks like this and somebody like, no. It's just going to get confused. It can't do three distinct people. But if you say a group of people, excited around a computer screen, then it's going to look pretty much indistinguishable from what you would get from Shutterfly or whatever, or not Shutterfly, whatever.
iStock or something,
Yeah.
We chatted before about how this changes some of the job scenes. It was very illustrative how you described it in terms of think that you have a bunch of interns, right? So you have several interns and that's what it can do. So it's not super sophisticated work. It's coming in, it's giving you that base level and you've given it quite specific directions, but it doesn't have enough experience to go all the way yet.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the intern piece of work? For those interns who in the past have been hired because that's how they started to learn the job or started to get to know a company, and the company used that also to start to explore, do I want to hire Mike in the future when he comes out of college or whatever it might be? what might this mean for the evolution of the connection between companies and candidates and interns and employees and how the career progression works going forward?
Yeah. Look, I think you're right. If this is doing intern work and you can do intern work more cheaply, then what do you need? Do you need interns to do intern work? Probably not. So for some companies, they may make a strategic decision to say, well, we still need a pipeline of people. And while the AI can do intern work, we want interns because we need to build the next generation of leaders. But instead of hiring 500 interns, maybe we're only hiring 100 interns, whatever it might be. I think those kind of outcomes are realistic.
Right.
I think the thing that I hope for the most with this is that people actually go out and do their own thing. I hope that AI is going to enable more entrepreneurs, more small business owners, more people that can just kind of go out and do this on their own. That is something where if we can democratize the access of that, where you could still be in school, you could be working part-time, you could kind of be building something. Maybe you have an AI agent that's kind of working on the side while you're in class doing this stuff to help with your business or whatever. That's amazing to me.
Sure.
And, in the end, the best 2 years I ever had in my career were the 2 that I was building a failed startup. Because I learned just so much. It didn't get to where I wanted it to be, but I learned so much. I struggled. I failed. I tried something else. I had little successes. I had little failures. And in the end, it didn't get me where I wanted. But wow, learned more than in my MBA or any job that I have ever had. And I think that's great because it's a different path than what we've had before. I think, most SBA statistics, Small Business Administration statistics in the US kind of show that we are actually at a pretty low level of small business startup and and entrepreneurship and so forth. Like, I hope we can use these tools to do that. I'm not saying corporations are going away. No, I am not saying that at all here. But I'm saying now I think that there's going to be a little bit more of a choice where people can do that. And frankly, some of the things you are going to learn so much more trying to build a business, even if it doesn't succeed, than you will in that 3-month internship at Google. That maybe when you do want to get a full-time job or whatever else, if it or do start that next company, you're actually going to have more that you're going to be able to potentially lean back on. So that is my optimistic hope, at least for that.
And I think it's powerful, particularly because previous technologies, which have included some AI in the past, have really enabled much greater entrepreneurship, more scalability, more ability for 1 or 2 person companies or small companies to be able to scale and go much further and broader with less money and having much more capabilities at their hand. What does it mean in terms of education? My daughter is at the end of high school, and there's you must not use AI and all kinds of penalties if one does. Then they go into college, you mustn't use it. Then when you're going into work, you must use it. You must know it. You must understand it. You must use it. So there's a tension there as education is changing and people are needing to be more self-directed and be thinking much more about problem solving and critical thinking from 3, 4, 5 years old. Now, how can education be able to embrace AI without undermining education and help prepare kids, students, and young workers as they enter the labor market?
Yeah, no, so it's such a good question. It's something that really hits close to home because I think I see this. I'm in the world of education and university, and I see this. I hear this. I talk to other universities and high schools and so forth, and to say that to have a school program that hey, you can't use AI at all at our school or something. I think that's frankly harmful. I really do, because it's not actually preparing them for what the future is going to look like. It's saying, hey, we want to use the exact same curriculum we've been using in the past. AI will break that. We're not going to evolve our curriculum to that. And I think that's a problem. And it happens all the time. Think about Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia, when it came out, educators were so against Wikipedia, like doing anything, like you should not use it, whatever. Now, I think the consensus is, well, it should be a primary source, but it's a good place to start. That seems quite reasonable to me.
Right.
Calculators. My daughter still, who's in 5th grade, she still doesn't have a calculator in school. She's doing stuff longhand. My son, who's in 8th grade, uses a calculator for everything.
Right.
Now, some school, like places like, some places in India, some schools basically say, well, you can never use a calculator. Should we go switch to that? Because we're all using calculators in our day-to-day. But I think it's more important to say, like, hey, it's actually important to understand how to do this without a calculator. And then to see, okay, well, once you kind of know how to do it without a calculator, well, you could use it because then we can do more advanced things with it.
Right.
It's the exact same thing with AI. I think there should be classes, to be very clear, where AI should not be allowed. My 8th grade son's English class, the teacher does not want any AI in the classroom. So how does he do it? They do all their writing in school. They all do all their writing in the classroom. Yep. And you know what? As a parent, I think that's awesome. I really do.
My daughter's English teacher does that too.
And that's a lovely thing. So he's had to pivot from that. He's had to change things up, but he knows that's out there. And you know what? It's still teaching my son how to write, how to think, and all these other things. In other classes, they actually do allow it, and it all kind of depends. It really has to be a case-by-case basis what you're doing. For all teachers, you should, just like how we talked about the illusion of history before, we shouldn't assume that because you taught something in 2014 one way, that in 2024, that is the same way that you should be teaching it today. The future is different. People need to know how to use AI and embrace it and understand it. You can teach both the fundamentals without it and then teach them how to do even more with it.
So very quickly, how about college? There's a lot that needs to change in terms of how things are being taught. I did come across one example, which is the teacher was saying, how would you prompt AI to do this question? And that was interesting because you had to think about the question in order to be able to ask the intern to be able to do I think it was a science question. So how dramatically education needs to change because of the integration of AI.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, and I'm so glad you're asking this, the first thing that I actually say to anybody who's a teacher, professor, anything like that listening to this, one of the things you could do is you could actually ask the AI this very question. Hey, I teach history, I teach whatever. I still want students to learn about this, and this, but do you know what, ChatGPT, do you know what, Claude, you actually make it tough. How do I change my curriculum and upload an old syllabus or something and say, how can I tweak that to work to actually teach them the fundamentals, but actually have them understand like the world of AI a little bit more? One thing I would actually, if I was teaching English at a college level, one thing I would do is I would actually say, hey, I want you to come to class with the best AI generated poem that you could come up with or whatever. If we're doing a poetry unit, like have them do it with AI, then have them print it out, bring it into class. And then, okay, well, everybody's got theirs printed out. I want you to take that piece of paper, pass it one to the right. And now I want you to grade the other person's.
Oh,
and then that becomes really interesting of like, wow, okay, so I see how other people did this with AI. I could see the shortcomings, and you can even just keep passing it. And maybe it's not even for a grade. I mean, there's so many ways to do that.
You have to be able to analyze the poem and what's good about it, what's bad about it. Love it.
Absolutely.
And you might even throw in a few human-generated poems in there and see if people can guess.
I love it. Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, you could have so much fun with this, and it could be so interesting. Ultimately, nobody today says you're not a real painter if you don't mix your own paints. If you're not out there crushing blueberries or whatever else to produce your own paints, like, well, you're not a real painter. Well, no, we've had technological innovations that have happened, and you don't have to make your own horsehair brushes. You can just go to a store and buy this stuff. And everybody says, well, do you know what? You're an actual artist. Right. I think in many ways, we're just becoming kind of directors of this new future where really having taste, being able to recognize quality, being able to understand what makes something good, what makes something bad, all that stuff. Those are the things that are going to matter much more than being able to put words on a blank white page. Like that skill is not going to be as important as the future as actually knowing, well, what words are good and why is that good versus why is something not as good. And so like, that's what we're moving towards. Like our skills are evolving as a species for all of these creative areas, business areas, and all that.
That's fascinating. And it helps pinpoint the opportunity and challenge for managers. As this other friend of mine in AI is talking about, really up-leveling what we're doing because we're being tasked with a more complicated, more creative and innovative elements of all our projects. As a recommendation for managers and leaders, particularly now, recognizing that the type of tasks that one is going to be needing to focus on and moving towards is that synthesis, which are the good words, which poem or product is better if you've tasked 3 different AIs with the same prompt for a particular product, which is the best one. How do we move towards that actually most easily, because there's just so much on our plates right now, apart from asking AI, which of course is a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can start and say which one of these is better AI, but by definition, AI is almost always going to be average. It like right now, because it's kind of built off of everything.
Yeah.
Most writing you get, most pictures you get are generally average. They it can kind of get something on the higher end of the spectrum, occasionally of the long tail, if you will, and do something extraordinary. But you got to do a lot to get that to really happen. So for the most part. Yeah, the AI is doing stuff that's average, but like ultimately, taste will matter more in the future than it will, and taste in whatever it might be. And I think this is just a good question for people to ask themselves on that. Like, okay, I'm a customer service rep. Like some people are saying that all of these jobs are going to go away. What are the unique things that I have to offer? And this is what I call I'm a big Golden State Warriors fan, and I call the Steph Curry effect. So people who don't follow basketball, Stephen Curry is this amazing basketball player up here in San Francisco.
Right.
People will pay hundreds of dollars to see him from a very far distance take a ball and put it into a round hole. And that's all that he does. And there are machines that can do it way more efficiently than Steph Curry does, but nobody's going to pay $500 to go see a machine do that. Right. We care about what humans do. We care about like that human achievements and so forth. Like I think that all this stuff matters, and to kind of know what is good, what is going to be a trend. Like you can't say to an AI, make me a viral video. I mean, maybe you could, and you could put out 1,000 videos and maybe one will go viral. But by definition, it's not going to be able to know that. It really won't be able to predict. Like these are so complicated. They're so intuitive. And all that AI knows is what the internet is trained it on. Right. It doesn't know the 99.9% of the rest of the world that isn't on the internet. Like we have such a long way to go. And I think with all of this, like the best humans are going to have a big role in this future. Even if, I heard something with Elon Musk saying that he thinks that by 2030, we will have an AI that is smarter than all 8 billion humans combined. That's kind of at least his definition of artificial general intelligence. And others have other you're like, how could I even compete with that? Like how, 6 years from now, 5 years from now, like, you're smarter than all of humanity combined. How can I compete? Well, in many ways, like sometimes I want to call customer service and talk to a human being. And I just do. And that's why not all customer service jobs are going to go away. A lot of them might. But sometimes you just want somebody to just know like, hey, I hear you.
Yeah.
And to know that it's an actual human that is saying that, and not just a bot who's been programmed to say that to you. So like, our jobs are going to change. Our world is going to change. I don't know how it's going to change, but it will. And like, again, the only way for us to really understand that, to embrace that, is to just like get in front of this as much as you can in your workplaces with your teams. Be the team who was playing around with the internet in 1996 and not the one who was dragged into it in 2006.
Right.
And believe me, we're going to be moving, AI is going to be moving much faster than the internet ever did.
And on that positive and thoughtful and cautious and energizing note, Mike, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear the evolution of how you've got to where you are and how you got into this innovating in technology and now where you are in terms of energizing people to be thinking and moving forward with it. So thank you very much for your time and your thoughts and your insights.
It was a pleasure being here, Sophie. It was great questions, great discussion. Thanks.
Thanks again so much to Mike Todasco, visiting fellow at San Diego State University, focused on artificial intelligence. You can follow Mike on LinkedIn and his podcast, Mike's AI Ideas. Immediate action tip. Get in front of the AI change as much as you can, in your workplaces, with your teams. Set up a channel to share, post, and cold call on team members to spur ideas and activity. If you are finding the new business and work environment hard to navigate, contact me for executive mentorship, as well as effective empathy-centered programs to enable multi-generational distributed leaders, managers, and teams to up-level rapidly to modern work and be ready for whatever lies ahead. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and like it. You can also write a quick review wherever you listen. For regular video updates, curated useful articles, research, and information, follow me on LinkedIn and sign up for my Work in Progress newsletter there. Thanks for listening. Until next time.